Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Karak with Mehreen show. I'm so excited to introduce today's guest. He is a comedy sensation that you all must have seen on your social media. He uses his wit, his puns, his humor to shed light on realistic experiences that we've all had, which make his content so relatable and so funny. But to get here, his story is really inspirational, from going from one dead-end job to the other until finally we were all blessed with his comedy videos. Let me please welcome Anand Raman.
Thank you for having me. That was an amazing intro and a lot to live up to as well.
I mean, you've already lived up to it though.
Yeah. It's been an interesting journey for sure.
Yeah, it's very exciting. So thank you so much for being here. As I mentioned, we're gonna talk about your life before going viral. So coming to Dubai, before we talk about South Asian communities, and then finally choosing this profession of being a comedian.
Awesome.
So to start off, I know that you were in the States and then you moved to Dubai, I believe 2017, 2018.
Yeah, so I actually was born and raised, just to cut back a little bit,
Okay.
I was born and raised in Sharjah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've lived in Dubai for like 20 years almost.
Okay.
And I grew up in a joint Indian family, which is quite interesting because that has its own advantages and disadvantages as well. Because growing up in a joint family, I think there's like a support system, which I think is very beautiful to have, because when one parent isn't around or they're working at a job, the other parents can help pick up the slack. But then there's also a lot of trauma and fun situations that have arisen from that. Like I remember one of my aunts force feeding her son Milo and Horlicks every day and him just crying.
To make him grow taller?
It was to make him grow taller. Yeah, you will not be a basketball player if you don't drink this Milo. Which, by the way, fun fact, Milo and Horlicks is extremely nutritionally deficient.
Oh, wow.
You would much rather just feed them like a protein shake or something. Like it's not
it's not even effective. This is the thing. I feel like we also, like South Asian families, they go with a lot of these little tactics that they come up with, and they're so confident that this will work. Like I want to have that level of confidence in my life, because like at the end of the day, usually they don't work.
Seriously, yeah. It's like there's so many different things that they have constructed in their head of how things could work, and like growing up in that kind of an environment was definitely fun. I would say I had like 6 cousins.
Wow.
We all lived in one house together. Yeah, so we would just construct stories, make each other laugh, and that was a lot of fun. And then I moved to the States. I moved to Buffalo, New York for 6 years, and that was interesting. I did a Bachelor of Arts in Graphic Design. Never ended up doing anything with design whatsoever. And my parents took out loans actually, and it cost them $250,000 for me to go to university to learn how to do Photoshop and MS Paint, which I never ended up using. And then in the States, I got a job in sales where I was selling phones to impoverished neighborhoods. And it was quite interesting. It was basically like a cell phone plan that I had to go and talk to people, and based on their credit score, they would either be eligible or ineligible to it. And basically it was in the hood, and I had to go and approach about 300 to 400 people a day, asking them like, hey man, would you like a phone? And they'd be like, no, I already have a phone. Get one for your kids. And they'd be like, I don't need a phone, man. Do you think I'm broke? And like, I almost got stabbed a couple of times. It was a very interesting experience.
What?
Yeah. So when I first moved to Buffalo, I thought Buffalo was New York City. It is not. It is not at all.
It's just New York.
It's New York.
The state of New York,
right? The state of New York, yeah. It's actually the 10th most dangerous state in New York. My house got broken into a couple of times. It was a learning experience for sure, coming from Sharjah to Buffalo.
Oh my God.
Sure.
You probably realized how many things you took for granted when you were here, right?
Oh yeah. I was missing the shawarmas and the home cooked meals for sure.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's insane. Like I didn't know you had those experiences. And it's true that it's one of the most dangerous cities in the world. Where did you study though?
So I studied in SUNY Buffalo.
Okay, so you studied there and then you started working there as well.
Yeah, because basically in order to get the visa to stay in America, you have to get a job there and prove that, you know, you're basically better than an American citizen at the job, which was a challenging task. And when I worked at this phone company, well, it was a cell phone, like it was a sales company for cell phones, which is a pun, cell phones. But I realized it was like pretty tough to do. And they said if I was able to sell enough phones, I would be able to get I would be able to get promoted to manager level, and then I would get a visa. But then I was like, I became the top performing salesman within a few months of working there. And they still were like, no, you have to like train now 2 to 3 other people. And I was like, this feels like a pyramid scheme. Yeah. So I'm just gonna, And then a couple of things happened. One of my best friends got stabbed. My house got broken into one time. And then I decided to call my parents. I'm like, Amma, Appa, I'll come back to Dubai.
So was that one of your main reasons for moving back to Dubai?
Yeah, it was one of the main reasons. One of the other reasons was I was just partying a lot. I got into, because growing up here in Dubai, you're so sheltered and, you don't really see that side of it. So then a lot of people that move out abroad, they end up going crazy because they're like, oh, I have access to all of these things now. And they kind of like just go haywire. And that was my case for sure. I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to party it up. And then I realized if I don't take a step back and evaluate my life in this moment, I'm probably not going to live very long. And so I decided, the best thing is to move back. So I didn't move back to Dubai initially. I moved back to India.
Okay.
Tried getting a job in India and it was brutal. I was in Mumbai living with my parents. For the first year, I was applying to jobs and they were offering me 1,500 to 2,000 dirhams a month. But I was out of college with a degree in graphic design and they wanted me to work like 8 to 10 hours for that amount. So I was,
that's insane.
Yeah. And then my sister was like, you know what? My sister had a job here. She was settled. So she was like, why don't you come live with me?
Okay.
And so I moved back to Dubai. And I lived with my sister for 4 years here in Dubai. I didn't have a place of my own. And I used to sleep on her couch. It was this pull-out couch. And basically for years, I just worked here in various jobs and slept on that couch, went back to work. And we got a dog as well. And the dog would sleep with me on the couch. On the couch. Yeah. He used to also use the couch as his toilet sometimes. He would like piss on the couch. And then I would have to clean it
That's
afterward.
Fun.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely a way to put it. And then I would go back to work. So yeah, that was my life for a few years.
Wow. So there's a lot to break down here. Let's talk a little bit about your life when you moved to Dubai. And then we can connect it to some experiences that you had in the US. Sure. So when you moved to Dubai and you were going from one job to the other, I want to know how that was like. Was it really hard to find a job here? How was your experience looking and finding a job?
It was extremely difficult looking for jobs over here when I first came back because I started off at internships that were unpaid. I worked at certain companies, which I can't name, that are kind of shady here, that offered me like free experience where I would just work for them for 3 to 4 months and then not get anything back in return. And then I worked as a social media executive at some of the companies here, but it was very toxic environments where the managers would expect the world out of me for very, very low pay. Most of the jobs in the beginning, for the first year and a half to 2 years, I could not find a job. I just could not find one. And I felt really bad because I was living with my sister, but like I had no way to pay rent or contribute to the household in any way.
Yeah.
So I would just pretty much like wake up, apply for jobs, go work out at the gym, and then come back, watch some podcasts, and then go to sleep. And that was my life for a long time.
Wow. And now you're in a podcast.
And now I'm in a podcast. Yeah, it's kind of surreal. But I ended up landing a job for a few companies where I had, it was for some Indian companies. And the Indian companies can have a very toxic work culture, especially some of the Indian managers that I was reporting to. I remember when I first started my jobs with them, I would contact my girlfriend and I would just be on the verge of tears, like anxiety, nervous breakdowns, because they expect the world out of you for such low pay and they don't trust you at all. There's no trust involved. In the beginning, I had to, get influencers to come. So I worked at food and beverage in social media, basically. So for the restaurants, I would have to get influencers to come to the restaurants, try out the food, take pictures of the food and stuff. So that was a regular part of my job. And then my managers would be like, no, that's not enough. You have to go to the restaurant and make sure that they're taking pictures of the food, and you have to see which pictures they're taking. And if they're not taking enough pictures, you have to let them know. So then I would have to go, because I didn't have a car, I would go through the metro to Dubai Mall. I would stand there next to these people while they were eating food.
And just watch them eat food.
Just watch them eating food. And I'd be like, hey, the casserole looks really good. Could you take a picture of that? And they'd just be like, why is this guy hovering over me while I'm trying to eat my food?
The person couldn't even eat, probably.
Yeah, no, he couldn't. And while all of this was going down, my manager would call me and he'd be like, where are you? And I'd be like, I'm in the mall where you told me to be. And he'd be like, I don't believe you. Like, hand the phone to the waiter over there. And then he would verify that I was there. Or like sometimes I would go to the bathroom and he would be like still calling me, like trying to find out where I am. I remember going back to the office one day and one of my colleagues messed up at their work. And he made them come into his office and do push-ups to reprimand him for a bad job. And I was like, this is terrible.
Not healthy at all. But did you find this particularly in Indian companies? So this is not commonplace. It was particularly in...
Yeah, it was for the most part in Indian companies. Indian managers, mainly from Delhi and Mumbai. I don't want to single them out. It's not a race thing. It's just the work culture that we're brought up to learn to... It's kind of that atmosphere that's cultivated, I remember just around the office having like posters that were like, where like there's cameras, don't steal anything, don't do this, don't do that. So you felt like your every move was being watched. And especially in social media, you have to be creative, you have to be free, but you feel like you're being restricted. I remember my manager saying the main boss of the company really liked me because he saw that I was trying to push new ideas and take the social media to a new realm. But the manager didn't like that. And he would come up to me and say, you're just the flavor of the month right now. It's like ice cream. Like next month, he's not going to care.
What is he on about?
And I'd be like, that's oddly like sexual in a way, but also like, yeah, I don't know. And I remember when I finally resigned from that company, I had to serve a 1-month notice. And he came up to me and he was like, now I'm going to make your life miserable. He said that straight to my face. And every single day he would just make me do meaningless things just to kind of like prove a point.
That's insane.
Yeah.
But so I want to compare a little bit because you talked about your experiences in the US as well.
Yeah.
How do you think it was different?
So I would say the work culture, especially not even from the US, but I think moving on from the Indian companies here to some of the American companies and the UK companies, the work culture is so much more different. Like they don't micromanage you. They allow you to breathe. They allow you to be your true self. I remember going from this environment to having an interview with one of the companies I work for now. And the guy who interviewed me was just like, oftentimes here in Dubai, it's so hard to find companies that really care about their employees. And so even if this interview, you decide not to come on board with us, I wish you the best of luck in your life. And if you need anything, I'm here for you.
Wow.
And I was like, this is so rare.
You're like, how is this happening? Like, am I dreaming? Like,
yeah, it was like PTSD. And I'm just like thinking about these managers and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And my new manager was from the UK and he would check in with me once a week. He would give me a call and he would say, hey man, is everything good? Everything all right? Any dramas? And I'd be like, no dramas. He'd be like, all right, fine, cheers. And he'd just cut the phone. I'd be like, this is amazing. Like,
wow,
this
that's
is all I've ever wanted. Yeah.
So this was all, of course, in Dubai as well.
Yeah.
And this is the company you're still working with?
Yeah, this is the company I'm still working with.
So you had like both the positive and the negative experiences coming here. I guess it also depends on who runs the company, as you were mentioning.
Absolutely.
What was your expectation before coming to Dubai? Like, what did you think? Did you think it would be relatively easy? Like, what did you think how the work experience would be like here?
I thought it would be easy to land a job. And given the fact that I had a degree from the States, I thought that meant something. And then once I reached here, I realized it's really about the color of your skin and your passport, to be honest. That takes you, like the experience takes you to a certain extent, but that also
plays a role for
sure.
But do you not think that plays a role in other parts of the world as well? Like in the States, do you think that doesn't play a role?
I think it definitely does play a role, but it's a bit more equal opportunity, I would say. And also, don't get me wrong, I have a lot of Indian friends here who are earning a lot and they work for amazing companies, and you know, it's all about the grind, but it is just about how much you can persevere through all
before
of the shit before you can find the gold. Yeah. So I think I had stints in between where I would work for different companies with a certain type of work culture where they were toxic and they were negative towards their employees, and then certain types of companies where they weren't. And now it's much more easier to dial in, but I feel bad for those people who first newly come to Dubai and, you know,
and they just like accept it and they have to go through it. Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think that because I was thinking a lot about how the perception of South Asian employees are in the workplace. So do you experience some kind of like stereotypical views from your managers because you're South Asian, or do you think that because some people say that being a South Asian, you get respected less in the workplace? What do you think about this?
I think in my personal experience, I've gotten more respect just based off of my experience and like I said, from the companies that treat you positively and they have a good work culture. Those are the ones that like, you know, give you a fair shake and those things. But then it's with those other companies that they don't really care. And yeah, like if you're South Asian, then it's definitely less so.
Yeah.
It's definitely more of an issue.
Yeah.
I remember working at this one pizza company where, and I don't think I'm allowed to say the name again, just because.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, so.
I don't want to get you like in jail or something.
Yeah. No, I remember working for this one company, and like the owner was so eccentric, and I think having a boss with views that are out there and kind of like excited about the work makes you excited to work in that company.
For sure.
Because he would come up and he'd be like, Anand, I just want to create a podcast studio here in the company. Here's my credit card. Just buy all of the equipment. And then by the next week, I had set up this beautiful podcast studio. Wow. I made it soundproof, and that was inside the office. And we were always doing cool things. Like we had hired the first female delivery driver, and we made a whole background around her, and you know, like shined a light on her stories. So
wow.
It was super cool. And so that kind of environment was very fun.
I love that. Oh my God, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And so we were talking a lot about like the positive, the negative experiences that you've had. One of the questions that I had based off of the reels that I watch of you, a lot of the jokes that you made are about job experiences. It's about the job market, job interviews, salaries, things like that. And I read this quote that comedians are funny psychologists because they're able to observe behavior and based off that make a joke, right?
Love that, yeah.
So a lot of this probably, those jokes come from personal experiences as well. So I want to dig in a little more on those personal experiences, even though we've been doing it quite a lot. So for example, when it comes to job interviews, I wanted to, you make lots of jokes about that. So just from your experience, how has that been like?
It's definitely been an experience. I think that a lot of places tend to waste your time where they will ask you to come for multiple rounds of interviews when they already have candidates that they've chosen, but they just kind of want to see like, okay, maybe this person could bring something to the table. But then I didn't have a car at the time, so I would either take a taxi or I would take a metro and travel long distances to go just for 5 minutes for them to see me. And then just say that they'll get back to me later. I had experiences where it was fun experiences too. Like I remember this one job where I was sitting over there, and then the owner came in flip-flops and shorts. And he just like interviewed me, and he was like, do you have any questions for me? And I had no idea he was the owner. So I was like, what do you do here? And he was like, oh, I own the company. And so those were fun experiences. I think salary expectations was one that really hits close to home. I think that, you know, there's a lot of people here that are earning way less than they deserve, and that there are companies that get away with paying very low salaries and not taking care of their employees. That was my life for sure. For a long time, I was stuck at a job description which made me work ridiculous hours, but not get compensated enough to even move out of my sister's place, not even get my own life situated, you know. So and pretty much a lot of it I had to pay back to my sister in rent or like helping out around the house. So I didn't really have much in savings. One topic that was unspoken about that really hits close to home for me was visas. And so basically that was one of the topics I had spoken with Sandeep about that I wanted to talk about, because this is not the case anymore. So a lot of people aren't aware about this, but a few years ago here in Dubai, a lot of companies would not give you a visa upon giving you the job. They would make you go through a probation phase for 6 months and then see if you're eligible to get the visa. So a lot of companies, I would have to fight tooth and nail just to get the visa. And some of them, I remember having conversations back and forth where I'm like, I've now been working here for 2 months and you still aren't getting me one. And they're like, yeah, but it's a huge expense on our part. We don't know if you're going to stick around. Maybe if you could just get your visa extended for a little more longer. And I'm like, I am going through the metro to Karama station with this man's sweaty armpit in my nose every single day just to work for you. And the least you could do is keep me here legally, you know. And they would threaten me with like, oh, if you end up leaving afterwards, you're going to have to pay the cost of what it took us to get your visa. And I remember this one company that I worked at, terrible company, social media company. It was run by these two women, and on WhatsApp, they would communicate with me about the visa thing, and they would be like, oh, hey, we're just looking into the visa situation right now. We might be able to get you that visa, but we were just wondering, could you wait another month? Could you wait another month? And then I was like, no, I really need to get this going right now. And I just remember being like, why is this a point of stress for me? Like, I'm doing the work that needs to be done. Why
shouldn't this be something that you deserve to get?
Yeah. I remember not getting health insurance for 8 months, working in one of the companies, fighting for my visa, getting very low pay. This was all with my degree from the States as well. So like, it's not like I'm like, I deserve this, but it's like the basic thing that, you know, everyone should have.
So for someone who wishes to move to Dubai, wishes to move and get a job, what is your advice that you would give to them? Before we move on to the next theme of this conversation, I just want to talk a little bit about advice that you would give to someone.
I would say just be very careful of vetting out what the work culture is like. Make sure that you resonate well with the people that are working in the company first. When you're having the interview with people, make sure that they align with your goals and values. And it is true what Sandeep said, ask not what the employee can do for the company, ask what the company can do for the employee at a certain point. Because when you start working at a company and you're new here in Dubai, there's a lot of ways they will try to screw you over. They might try to hold your passport, which is illegal now because you can just complain to the authorities, but they might try to not give you a visa. They might try to cut corners in terms of your salary, in terms of your health insurance. But know the law well.
Know your rights.
Know your rights. Know the work culture that you're getting into. And I would say that if you're moving to Dubai, it's much better off if you're already well established in your home country, so that you can, and hopefully if you can apply from abroad and you already have something, you've seen the offer letter, you know what you're getting into, then you come here. Because a lot of people come here with no backup plan.
And then they try to get jobs here.
And then they try to get jobs. That was my life for the longest time.
Yeah. So it's crazy going through all these stories, because for me, I'm in university. I know I hear stories about it, but really getting into the deep and the depths of like what you go through. So it was really insightful and just crazy to hear. So
Absolutely.
It's so cool, like how you persevered through that. And now like, I mean, it's amazing to see, because you are extremely talented. Like everyone knows that when they watch your videos. I know that when I watch your videos. So seeing how it was not just like an overnight success, you really worked hard for it. So moving on from the discussion on your experience trying to find a job, I want to talk about South Asian families and communities a little bit. You touched on that in the beginning where you were mentioning joint families. You mentioned you lived in a joint family and then eventually you moved in with your sister. So one question is, how did your family react to you wanting to be a comedian? I know that you did comedy on the side even while, doing these jobs. So what was your family's perception and reaction?
Yeah, I think in the beginning, comedy was the one thing that saved me mentally and spiritually in my life. When I first moved to Dubai, back from the States, I used to watch a lot of comedy podcasts, and that was how I spent a majority of my time just thinking up of new ideas. I would create this podcast in my sister's room with my cell phone, just recording myself speak into a mic, and wow. I would get like 30 views on Facebook, but I was so happy. I was like, this is my thing. And I remember my parents being supportive of it in the beginning because I used to watch a lot of Russell Peters with my dad. That's how I got into comedy, and it inspired me a lot to get into it because it was another Indian man abroad who was killing it and showcasing that, this can be an actual sphere of profession, yeah. And South Asians, obviously, they have a lot to say about comedy, like my parents, for example, even to this day, they sometimes are not happy when I talk about them or I talk about certain things in the podcast. And so creatively, sometimes they can hinder you a little bit, but you just kind of have to stay true to the craft. And if you believe in what's funny, then at the end of the day, it speaks for itself. When I first started creating things, I think my parents didn't think too much of it because obviously, there wasn't that much attention around it at the time. So they were like, oh, it's just a hobby. It's just a phase and, it's going well. When things started picking up and then really blowing up and then like their neighbors started coming up to them and they're like, this is your son. And then like, friends and family started reaching out to them. Then they were a bit more like, okay, this is something.
It's going somewhere. Yeah.
It's going somewhere. Yeah. I think the culture and mentality behind it is still rooted in generations of not understanding really where comedy comes from and it being respected as a true craft. Because even to this day, when I have so many opportunities to pursue it full time, I've spoken to my parents about it. And even yesterday, my dad messaged me and he said, you cannot quit your full-time job. This is not going to lead anywhere. You have to be very careful. Think 10 times before you do this because it might not be a viable option for you. Because my dad grew up in a small town in Kerala, and his dad was had a stall where he would sell cigarettes, and they grew up very poor. And so to him, it's all completely new and it's a new sphere. And so it scares them to a certain extent. They want to protect you as well.
Of course,
there's that certain mentality of what will the neighbors think when it comes to comedy, because they're very worried about,
what other people think.
That's always been the case. But they're very supportive of me. Luckily, my parents, they love me a lot. They've come to my shows and I talk about a lot of crazy stuff on my shows. And they're like front row and, so it's...
Do you feel nervous doing that in front of your parents? Like, how do you feel about that?
I feel so much more nervous when my parents are there. I don't know why. It's like when someone's there that I know, it makes me so much more nervous. I could perform
makes sense.
For a sold out arena with like 10,000 people and I'd be so chill if no one was there. But if it's like a room of 20 people and my parents are there, I'm like, oh my God, I have to kill it.
I know. I completely understand. There was one time when my dad was in one of my recordings and he sat right there. And oh my God, like I was just like, I have to be as perfect as I could. Like, like no matter, even if there's like 20 people sitting here, I would be okay. But when my dad is there or my parents are there, I completely understand.
What, was he making any side comments or anything? Or he was like...
There were a few comments in the end. Like he was like, mention this also, talk about this as well. Like he would, And then the recording ended and then he went to the studio operator. He's like, can you play it again? Can you start recording again? She forgot to mention one question. I was like, bro.
That's so nice.
So, why do you think that is? Is it because, like, I don't know, South Asian parents put some kind of expectation on you.
Yeah.
But that's parents in general as well.
I think so. I think growing up, because I lived in a joint family, a lot of my cousins, they went on to become doctors and engineers, of course, and, respected professions in the Indian community. And my parents would always make the comparison, but not in a very direct way. They'd be like, oh, Akash is now an anesthesiologist. And I'd be like, put me to sleep, please. Like right now, But I always knew that I couldn't do that because I was the creative kind. I always knew something was different about me, because I remember even in the 3rd grade being on the bus and sitting with my friends and feeding them dosa and telling them vivid tales of Pokemon stories, where I would craft these like fantastical stories out of thin air, and like they would just be so super entertaining because I would mix like funny in with everything. But aside from that, when I first started doing stand-up, I used to draw from a lot of my life experiences, a lot of my trauma, because as you know, like comedians like to talk about their past and deep trauma and stuff like that. And obviously a lot of that stems from an Indian household. So you're talking about your parents. I used to talk about my dad, how we had parrots growing up. And my dad once, so we had 2 parrots. One was Romeo and one was Smokey.
Why not Juliet?
we didn't think that far ahead. Honestly, it was very uncreative. I don't know. Romeo ended up being a girl, funnily enough.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so
wow, this was very well planned.
It was. It's a tragic tale. So I remember this one time. So my dad brings home Smokey from the pet store. He sets the cage down, and as soon as he set the cage down, like a bunch of cockroaches came out of the parrot's feathers. Like, I don't remember if it was cockroaches or like bugs, like just fleas started coming out of its feathers.
That's normal.
And my dad looks at the parrot and then looks at me and goes, it must be from Pakistan.
What the heck?
I go, Dad, that is so racist. How does that even make sense?
How does that make sense? Oh my God.
I was like, is this parrot drinking Roo Afza or something? Like, how did you even get that?
Roo
How did you get that? Like, what? Like, there was no inclination of like, he was like, no, I know, like, these type of parrots look like this generally or something. I don't know, right?
What do you mean?
Because it was green. I'm like, all parrots are green. Like,
It's not like the Pakistani parrots are the only green ones. Yes. What do you mean?
Like, no, there's African greys and there's Pakistani parrots. Like, So he went back to the store and he returned that parrot.
Because it was too Pakistani.
He returned it because of the cockroaches and the feathers. Yeah, but it might have had something to do with that as well. I don't know. But we got another parrot. And I remember one day coming home from school and I was like, I couldn't find both of the parrots. And I was like, where are they? And he looked at me, he's like, parrots deserve to be free in the wild, man. So I let them go. And I was like, Dad, we don't live in the Amazon jungle. We live in Sharjah, Rola. Like, those were domesticated parrots that lived off seeds and stuff. So unless they ate from like a cafeteria nearby, they're
gonna die.
Yeah. So like, I had to talk about this on stage, you know? And when I talk about it on stage, my dad would just call me and be like, I never did that, man. Like,
they're just in denial. Yeah, they're just gaslight you. They're like, you have a bad memory.
Yeah, I said that parrot was from Sweden. Like, it is not like... So I like, my dad still doesn't like it when I talk about him.
Like personal experiences from your family, yeah.
Yeah, personal experiences. But otherwise, he's pretty supportive. Actually, he's very supportive now. He's come on board with this whole thing with me and Sandeep. He like will call me up and he'll be like giving me ideas like, yeah, you should talk to Sandeep about this. And
nice.
My mom will be like, why is Sandeep getting all this spotlight? Why aren't you, showing your funny side as well in the videos? Like, showcase both sides, And they came to London for my show. They supported me in person. Yeah, so they're like very, very supportive.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I think in terms of how you were saying that they're very supportive, and of course there are some reservations that they might have in terms of what you want to do taking forward with the career. But it's cool to hear all these experiences because I think people can relate. Like for me personally, When I started this podcast, my family are super, super supportive. My dad was the one who encouraged me to start it initially as well.
Awesome.
And when I started, I started having a lot of fun. But in the beginning, when I started posting clips and I talked about South Asian families and I talk about things like marriage, which is also a topic we discuss in our household. And I talk about, like, why do we have to get married like at this certain age? And I do all that. And then initially, obviously, my parents were like, why are you talking so much about marriage? Like, no one forced you to get married or anything like that. Like, they take it like personally. And like gradually they start realizing like, no, I'm just addressing things. It's not necessarily aligned with what my family thinks, even though some of them of course are. But yeah, I think there's you navigate through those some reservations and some like support, I guess.
Yeah, and definitely in social media too. Before I started the whole podcast thing, I was trying anything and everything, honestly, because I just loved to make people laugh. And so I would do this thing where I would go out on the streets and I would ask people for puns. And I would give people puns because I love making puns.
Yeah, you're really good at it.
Thank you. And I would also do like stitches where like I would do like funny videos and stuff like that. And some of them, like my parents would just contact me and be like, hey, this video is too much, take it down. Like you're going to get in trouble for this. And then like, I realized after a while, like I can either listen to them and, take it down, or like I have to put a stand right now and be like, no, like creatively, I have to explore. And, as a comic too, for myself, I'm like, if I get jailed, it's going to be another comedic story. So it's going to be
everything is a story. Every life experience is worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a lot of life experiences living here in Dubai as well. Did you go to an Indian school here in Dubai, or did you go to?
Yeah, it was British school, but like, of course, like lots of the teachers were Indians, and I was born and raised in Alain.
Oh, okay.
So lots of Indians there as well. So yeah, I guess you could say Indian school.
Yeah, because I went to an all boys Indian school till like the 10th grade, 11th grade. So it was.
Oh, that's interesting to talk about as well. How was that like?
It was a horrible experience. I just remember I was obese. I was super fat and very low self-esteem. So I think I used comedy as a coping mechanism as well in high school. And, like I didn't we weren't even around girls until like the 10th grade, because I remember up until the 3rd grade, it was co-ed. And then after that, I moved to a school where it was just all boys. And the only way you would see girls is after like when the end of school, when you're going in the bus, and like that was your time to kind of like just like you're like,
take a peek.
Yeah, I got 2 minutes to make a good impression. It's behind bus number 32. I'm talking to this girl and I'm just like, hey girl, you going back home? Yeah, me too. Yeah, I'll catch you later. Like
smooth,
yeah, exactly. So I remember just like yeah, that was, and sometimes there would be like this one girl that all of the guys were attracted to in the high school. There wasn't like a very good majority of girls that were around us all the time. So pretty much like when there was one cute girl, all of the guys would just be like, oh yeah bro, even I like her. Yeah bro, even I like her. Yeah bro, you like
so
her
everyone
too?
just likes that one girl because she's the only attention you could get.
Yeah. So then we'd all talk about like, how are we gonna like get this girl? But then we realized like, oh, we all can't have her. So
but what do you think of like these type of schools where it's like all boys, all girls?
Yeah, I think it's definitely setting people up for failure, because I think you don't get to experience intersexual dynamics to just a normal degree where it's like normal to be around the other sex. And I think that kind of sets you up for failure later on in life, because you kind of have this like weird sensation of like, they're just mystical beings, even though like, if you're just around them in class, it just becomes this kind of normalcy. And
exactly.
I think, that was definitely like removed from the equation.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I think like, and also like the more restrictions you place, the more people will try to rebel.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Kind of like what you were saying, that when you had access to like parties and all of those things, you naturally became more inclined to it. Like that just makes sense. That's just human nature.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's yeah, it's interesting to talk about these type of school dynamics and how that affects you growing up.
For sure.
Did it affect you like later on in your life, like after you left school and tried to, went into the real world and started talking to girls?
I think it was just majorly like unlearning a lot of the things that, like all of the guys are like, I think this is how you hit on women, but like none of us have any idea.
Any experience whatsoever.
Yeah. And then just like going out and experiencing it for myself. But a major part of it was just, because both of my parents were at work all the time, they didn't really have much time to be around us and everything. So a lot of the things that I learned was just from my own personal experience, or like watching podcasts online and those kind of things. Like
that helped.
So I think that definitely was a thing. And then I moved to India for a bit in the 8th and 9th grade.
Okay.
Because I wanted a dog really bad, and my parents were like, "We'll get you a dog if you go to boarding school in India for a bit." I was like, this is the worst trade-off ever.
Yeah, I don't think that's a fair exchange. Like,
uproot my entire life and just go and live in this place.
But you took it?
I took it, yeah. I was naive and dumb, and I was like, okay, you know what? I'll live in this boarding school. So I remember, actually, the boarding school came a bit earlier. So one of my sisters who was a bit more rebellious, my parents dropped her off to the boarding school. And I was really young at the time. I was like, I think in the 5th grade or something, and I thought she was going on like some really amazing vacation to this amazing hostel. So I started crying. I'm like, why does she get to go? I want to go too. And my parents are like, yeah, sure, we'll drop you off too. And I remember just sitting there the first night, and there was like bunk beds, and like it was this Indian hostel with like so many guys just in one room. And I sat there and I opened my Archie comic book, and I was sitting on the bed and I was just reading it. And my elder sister, who knew what was going on, she was just crying, and she's like, oh my God, I feel so bad. And I was like, go guys, don't worry. I'm going to enjoy myself. I'm on vacation now. And the second day, I was like, where is my mom and dad? I'm missing everyone. And then I would sit in this dormitory, like looking at a picture of my mom and crying every night for like a month. And that was a very crazy experience, because my parents would send me like all of these amazing snacks from Dubai, like, digestive biscuits and ramen noodles and all of this stuff. And like all the other kids would be like, we want it. And they would just come and like take all of my snacks.
Yeah.
And I would get bullied a lot in this boarding school. And then that was definitely a learning experience.
How is the environment like in a boarding school in India?
It was very rough at the time. I think especially because I came from a sheltered place in Dubai, and like they were used to the whole Indian environment. And I think there was like a lot going on in the background that was weird. Like a lot of the people that worked there were just up to a lot of shady stuff. So that was definitely weird. I remember going to a co-ed high school in India as well. And that was a fun experience, because that was again back in the 9th and 10th grade afterwards. I moved around a lot. Yeah. And in the 9th and 10th grade, and I remember being around girls again, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so nervous. I don't know how to talk to women anymore, because I've just been talking to
boys.
Rajesh and Mukesh in, recess. So like I remember joining this breakdancing crew, because I was like, this is what'll get me the girls.
This will make me look cool.
Yeah, but I was also obese at the time. So I was trying to do like a handstand and stuff, but I was so fat. And I remember I started slowly getting the hang of it. I was getting a bit better at it. And then one day I went up to the teacher, and he came up to me and he's like, are you sure this is what you want to do? Breakdancing isn't for everyone. And that broke my heart. I was like, oh my God.
No.
And this was in front of like my crush and like a bunch of other people as well. So yeah.
Well, quite an experience you've had even with schools, moving around through all these different countries. Like you lived in India, US, and in Dubai, like Sharjah and Dubai. So it's pretty cool to hear all these vastly different experiences, but how you've kind of learned through them, and now you're talking about them. So all of these experiences contributed to you eventually choosing to be a comedian, to take up comedy, to make comedic clips, and all of these things that you're doing now. So when you chose to be a comedian, which is relatively an unconventional path in South Asian communities, especially, even though there are some amazing comedians, but still relatively new. How was that like? How was it like, your whole experience of choosing this profession?
Yeah, I think initially I just kind of was using it as an outlet. I didn't really know if it was going to be a full-time profession or not. I just knew that after work, I love to go blow off some steam and try it out. So I joined a comedy course here in Dubai called Dubomedy. Shout out Dubomedy. It was a fantastic course that taught me the basics, ins and outs. And after which they put me on stage and I did my first show and it went really, really well. It was in front of 500 people, I remember.
Wow.
And that was my first time ever doing comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember people hanging on every word and they were laughing really loud, which is not the best actually, because it sets the bar so high. And then I've just been chasing that feeling ever since.
Every time, yeah.
But I have done a lot of things in my life. Let's just say I partied a lot. I've done a lot of substances. I don't know if I can speak about that, but I've done a lot of things. But the feeling from stand-up comedy is the best feeling I've ever had. Like, it is the greatest high I've ever gotten, especially like when people are giving you that deep belly laugh and just releasing all the stress from their day. And it's from stuff that you're just throwing out to them.
Yeah.
It's one of the best feelings. So starting out, it was rough. The comedy scene here in Dubai was very new. There was one bar called Comedy Kicks in Sports City and in Kicker's Sports Bar, where we all would congregate on the weekend once a week to perform. And there was no other stand-up clubs here. But slowly now it's picking up. There's like a lot more clubs.
A lot more now, yeah.
A lot more producers, a lot more clubs.
So even when it comes to creating these jokes, your craft, there's like a fine line between being racist or offensive and making a joke and making people laugh, right? So how do you draw that line? Is that been a struggle for you?
It is a struggle in a certain sense, because for me, freedom of speech is one of the most important things. I hate being confined on what I have to say. That's always been the case for me growing up. And I think funny is funny. That's one of my main principles. I think you can joke about any single topic as long as you make it digestible and as long as it's funny at the end of the day. If you can package it and if people laugh at it, humor is based in the truth. And so if you're laughing at something, you agree with it.
There's some truth to it.
There's some truth to it. And so I think that is something that is a bit tricky here, because obviously you have to watch what you say and you can't just be completely racist. But at the same time, I joke about everything. I joke about every race. I joke about Filipinos. I joke about white people, black people, Indians. I'm very self-deprecating as well. So I think people don't have really room to criticize me, because I start out my set by making fun of myself. I will say though, in the beginning of my stand-up career, I did something that I'm not the most proud of. I would make a lot of self-deprecating jokes on Indians. And it was very like a low bar that I was hitting that I was not proud of. And I didn't realize it until another comedian called me out on it. And he was saying, all of your jokes are pretty much just making fun of Indians to a room filled with white people. And it's kind of like you're pandering to them.
Yeah.
And then I realized that, and I slowly started shaping my set a little bit more. It was still funny, don't get me wrong. But then I was just like, I don't need to just specifically talk on this topic. I can talk on different topics while still being funny, you know, so.
Makes sense. And have there been instances where you kind of crossed the line where maybe it took a turn that you didn't expect?
Yeah, for sure. I've had a lot of moments where people have yelled out things, they've heckled, I almost got into fights. There's been a lot of moments. Usually it's the people that are the most offended are white women. The ones in the comedy shows. Like, I have this really good Filipino joke that I am very proud of that I wrote, which I said the pandemic was very hard on my dating life. I even came up with an imaginary girlfriend. But then I went to a Papa John's one day and the Filipina waitress came up to me and said, "Hello, ma'am, sir." And I said, "Ma'am, sir, you can see her too." Right? And I'm very proud of that joke. And Filipinos love that joke, and they're the most fun audience members, by the way. Indians and Filipinos are the best at comedy shows. Like, they know how to laugh at themselves and at other people.
Yeah.
But it's always like a white person in the back who's like, that's not funny. Like, you're being racist. And I'm just like...
It's so funny because, like, Filipinos themselves don't get offended, but, like, a white woman says that Filipinos would get...
fighting on their behalf?
Yeah.
Like, they're loving it, you know? And they're usually the most chill about it. So I've had instances where people will yell out things to me. But I've always been very, like, good at improv and crowd work.
So you can, you know, see the room, test it out and see how...
Out. Yeah, and I like throw it back on them. So that's always a fun situation.
Very cool. I think we're almost at time, but I want to ask you one last thing, which is in terms, again, advice, because some comedians may be watching, some people coming to Dubai wanting to be a comedian. What would you say to them? What is your advice to them on maybe their craft, and also how they can manage coming to Dubai and being and trying to get into this path of comedy?
I think the path of comedy is for the brave. It's also for the ones that want to tell their own truth and their life story. And I think if you want to pursue comedy, writing is one of the most important things. It seems like it's homework, it's boring, but that's how you creatively package your thoughts into a digestible format for people. And so when you want to do comedy, you have to start by curating just even a 3-minute set. Make sure that you go out and test the material, test it with friends, test it with family, and talk about it in your own true tone. Like, the kind of way you talk when you would with a close friend and you're trying to make them laugh is the same tonality that you have to have with the stage presence that you have on stage.
Because I was watching this video and they were saying that some jokes have to be delivered in a different tone. Like, it depends on the joke as well. Like, sometimes people deliver a joke in a monotone way because it just sounds better. Like, it's more sarcastic, I guess.
Yeah.
And some jokes are delivered in, I don't know, more enthusiastic. So I guess it also depends on the joke.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think you have to know yourself and don't beat yourself up when you're first getting into the craft if you don't know what your tone is, your voice, because you will discover that 5 years in, 10 years in. I'm still discovering a lot about myself, and I've been doing stand-up for almost 6 years now. It takes a really long time to get to really know what your authentic style is. I know for a fact that I'm very high energy. That's why I gravitated more towards hosting and crowd work and those kind of things. I'm not very deadpan, but if you have a monotone style, then you should try to explore more in that style. And I would say just I've seen so many people bomb on stage and then I never see them again. But the true mark of a comedian is when you bomb really hard, but then you end up coming back and you keep coming back because you know that it's going to be worth it in the end.
Makes sense.
I think that's the most important thing.
Thank you very much. This was so fun. I enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it too.
I really loved it. It was super fun.
It's so cool hearing your experiences, honestly.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. In the end, we do like a little cheers.
Yes. Cheers.
Wait, can you...
Oh, yeah. There you go. Sponsors, there you go.
Hey,
let's go. Cheers.
Thank you. Is it finished? Do you want more? It's probably cold now.
I like it cold, actually. It's good.
Really?
Yeah.
I hate it cold.
Really?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was so much.